Angular is extremely popular as it enables secure binding of data to HTML elements. Angular directives explored a way to build HTML and CSS modular components. It was basically the first one that gained immense popularity over the rest of the JavaScript frameworks. So before we get started on how we learn Angular, the first thing we need to know is how to install Angular. With that, I, Bhavita, on behalf of Edureka, welcome you to today's session on how to install Angular CLI in your Windows 10. So without further ado, let's see the steps that is involved in installing Angular CLI. The first step is to install the server side. Next, we'll install Angular CLI, and then we'll set up our Angular CLI. With that, we have to install our editor, and then we'll see the features of our editor in order to set up our coding. But before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to Edureka YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Also, if you're interested in online training certification, do check out the link given in the description box below. Now, in order to install the server side, first thing that we need to understand is what is the server side that is required. Here, we use Node.js. This is the Node.js official website in order to install. So let's go ahead and do that right ahead. So here in my browser, I'm just going to say Node.js, download, and you get the official website link. Here, come back and see which is your system. I'm just going to say Windows installer. Here, as you can see, my MSI file is being installed. And once this is done, you can start setting up your Node.js. Now, the first thing is to do is, there will be a bunch of permissions that you will have to accept. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, as you can see, it says it is preparing for setup. Now, once this is done, just keep hitting your next. We'll see the next step, what we have to do. Now, once my Node.js is installed in the system, open your command prompt and check for the Node version. How do you do that? Node space -v. Now, hit enter. As you can see, the version of the Node.js is mentioned here. Now, in case you hadn't installed Node.js in your system, it would have shown you a bunch of messages along with an error. Now, since Node.js is installed in my system, as we just did it now, it is showing the version. So the next step is to install our Angular CLI. Now, to install our Angular CLI, let's dive into the official website of Angular. So let's go ahead and do that. Here, I'm going to say Angular IO. Here, let's say get started. And when you say get started, you can dive into the setup part. And as you can see here, there is a command that is specified here, which says npm install -g at Angular CLI. Now, this is the command to install our Angular CLI. What is npm? It is Node Package Manager, which we have just installed. Now, using that, we can install our Angular CLI. So make sure you've installed your Node before you install your Angular CLI every time you're setting up your Angular CLI. Now, let's go ahead and use this command in our command prompt. So here in my command prompt, as I've copied, I'm just going to say paste and hit enter. Now here, npm, as I mentioned, is Node Package Manager. Install G is for generate. Now you have to generate your Angular CLI. Now, there is a bunch of operations that will take place here, which will make sure that our Angular CLI is installed in our system. Now, in order to make sure that our Angular CLI is being used in our projects, we need to have an editor. Now, using that editor itself, we will create our projects, we will create our applications in Angular. Now, for that, we need to install some editor. So we'll look into that process next ahead. Firstly, let's see how Angular CLI is being installed here. Now, as you can see, Angular CLI has completely been installed. Now, the next step is to check for the version. So let's go ahead and do that. So to check the version, ng space --version. Now, you can give --v as well. Now, as you can see here, our dev kit, our core, everything has been installed and each of the versions have been shown here, including the Node version, Angular version, Package Manager version, and the operating system. So this means our Angular CLI is up and running. So in order to create our projects, in order to make sure that we set up our Angular in a right way, we have to have an editor. Now this is to make sure that we run a project hassle-free and it is easy to use. So let's go ahead and install an editor. So after installing our Angular CLI, the next step is to set up our Angular CLI. Now we've seen setting up first step here, which is installing our Angular CLI using npm. Now the next few steps is creating our project, diving into our project folder and creating our application. So in order to set up our Angular CLI, we need to have an editor. Now the next step is to install our editor. Here I'm installing Visual Studio Code, and hence I'm diving into the original website of Visual Studio in order to install my Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and do that. So here in my browser, I'm just going to say Visual Studio Code download, and according to your operating system, you can go ahead and download. Now, since mine is Windows, I'm just going to say download. Here, as you can see, my setup file is being downloaded. And once this happens, make sure you install. Now, once my setup file is ready, just open it and it will ask you a bunch of permissions. Again, you'll have to just accept it. Now, since I have already installed my Visual Studio Code setup, it says you have already installed. So I'm just going to hit OK. Now, once you install your Visual Studio Code, you must be opening this page. Now, this is our setup page. As you can see, there is a bunch of themes that is involved in our Visual Studio Code. You can select any of it. Now, I'll just keep it to default. Now, the first thing is to create our project. For that, I will just open any of my folder. So here I have opened some new folder. It is just a random folder. So next, let's go ahead and create all our projects. So for that, all you have to do is jump into the terminal tab. Now say new terminal. Now here in my folder, the first step, as you saw in the theory part, is to create the project. Now let's go ahead and do that. For creating our project, I'm going to say ng new and the name of the project. Here I'm just going to say project. Hit enter. Let's see what happens. Now as you can see, it is giving me bunch of errors. Now why do you think this is happening? The first thing that you need to remember while creating Angular CLI project is your terminal should always be in the command prompt mode. Now since all your installation, all your setup has been through command prompt, giving your commands through PowerShell doesn't really affect your operation. Now in order to make sure it is up and running, just make sure it is in the command prompt mode. And now if you give your command ng new project, it should be created. Remember, before you start with new project, you need to set up and install your Angular CLI, which we have already done. So I'm just going to say ng new project. Here it will ask if you want to add Angular routing. Now for now, let's just say yes. And it will also ask for our styling purpose. If we need any particular type of styling, I'm just going to say CSS here. And now a project is being created. Now, as you saw, after installing our editor, we also saw our features and we also made sure that it was ready and up for code setup. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to see how our project that we just created looks in our browser. Now, as you can see, all my project requirements have been set up and been installed. But the thing that you have to notice here is it is not directed into my project folder. So in order to direct into my project folder, I am going to say cd project. And now it's in my project folder. Now, if I give any command, it will be taken by our project itself. So first and foremost, let me go ahead and see how my project created looks in my browser. So for that, the command that we use is ng serve --open Now you can say open, it will redirect directly on your browser. Now if you don't want that, you just can say ngserve without any open command. For this, you have to take the link and paste it in your browser and you can view your response. So I'm just going to say open in order to open directly. Now there is a command that has been asked in the Angular setup. Just give an appropriate answer. Now once the compilation is done, we will be able to see our output. Now notice while it is compiling, it will compile all the browser platform, the router. Now it is compiled successfully. Also, it is taking me to the browser. Now as you can see, from the project that I created thanks to my Angular CLI, all my UI is nice and running. Now these are the default UI. You can go ahead and change while you create your component, while you manipulate in your project. Now as you can see here already, for creating component, this is the command. Now once you get started with your creation of application, you will bump into many more commands where you can create number of things in Angular. So with this, we come to the end of today's session, and I hope you have learned how to install, set up your server-side, client-side along with the editor. Until we meet again next time, happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!